Ugh, ads are such poop. Subscribe to Acast Plus now to skip ads and more for just $1 a month. Click the link in our show notes to learn how. And hey, we're on Patreon too. Your support helps cover the cost of running a podcast. For $2 a month, you can get early access to all our episodes ad-free, plus bonus episodes exclusive to Patreon subscribers only. Visit patreon.com/sacrilegious discourse to sign up now.
That was a great dinner.
So great. Wait, where'd you park the car?
Oh, the one I just sold to Carvana.
What? When did you do that?
When you were still looking at the menu. I went on Carvana.com and all I had to do was enter the license plate or VIN, answer a few questions, and got a real offer in seconds.
They picked up the car already?
No, I parked around the corner. But they are picking it up tomorrow and paying me right on the spot.
Oh, no wonder you picked up the check.
Yeah, about that. Thought we were going halvesies.
Sell your car to Carvana. Visit Carvana.com or download the app to get a real offer in seconds.
Think you know diamonds? Probably not as much as you think. Our engagement ring, the gift from a partner, or the jewelry we buy to celebrate a win sparks a lot of joy. But did you know that Stone is connected to 10 million people around the world? From Canada to Africa to Australia. The natural diamond industry provides healthcare and more to remote communities. Each natural diamond promises a more sparkling future for generations to come. Discover so many more natural diamond truths at naturaldiamonds.com/thankyou.
I'm Stephanie Wong, and I'm your guide through the people and places that make up the internet. And I'm back as the host of the 3rd season of Where the Internet Lives, a podcast from Google about the unseen world of data centers. This season, we're exploring how data centers change the world around them in surprising and transformative ways. We'll hear stories about prairie restoration, the solar energy boom, recycled canal water, and cities undergoing economic transformation. Subscribe to Where the Internet Lives on Google Podcasts, YouTube, Apple, Spotify, or anywhere you get your shows.
Welcome to Sacrilegious Discourse.
I'm husband.
And I'm wife.
Together, we're reading the Bible for the very first time.
We grew up without religion and wanted to know what all the fuss was about.
Well, what have we learned so far?
That God is a dick, and apparently some people believe in talking donkeys?
We're not trying to pass ourselves off as experts.
Nope, we're just reading the Bible for the first time and giving our first take reaction.
If you'd like to join us in this venture, you might consider starting at episode 1.
Otherwise, jump in wherever you like.
All right, let's go read the Bible.
Yeah, let's get to it. Husband!
Wife!
Do you know what today is?
Well, it's Saturday.
It sure as fuck is, and we're doing Q&A Saturday.
That's right. And what are we going over today?
We're going to go over Job chapters 21 through 25.
Is that all you got to say?
That's all I got to say.
Okay, well then let's go say some more after the break.
Okay. Okay, so we are doing a Q&A covering chapters 21 through 25 of Job.
Right.
And there wasn't really a lot to say about it beyond. We weren't always sure that we were reading it correctly or understanding it correctly, even though it was kind of some of it was obvious and some of it was like, what the fuck?
Right, but they're being so long-winded about it. And just like blah, 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 blah.
So I thought instead of doing one of our other rabbit holes that we had listed, that I would kind of go over, make sure that we're following correctly. Yeah. And do basically like a little summary of each chapter. And I do have something to say about one of the chapters that is a fun Q&A thing.
Oh, okay. So there's at least one fun thing in here.
Yes.
Okay.
There's at least one fun thing.
That's great. So stay tuned for the fun thing at least.
Yes, and I'll let you know the fun thing when we get to it, okay?
Okay.
Okay. So chapter 21 contains Job's last speech in the second cycle of the debate that he has with his friends. Oh. Remember I told you when we first started Job that the chapters can be broken down into sections called rounds. Yeah. So chapter 21 is the last speech that Job gives in the second round. Okay. Yeah. And it's the only speech in which Job confines all of his remarks clearly to his friends.
Got it. Like and that makes sense because he started talking to God somewhat.
but that was in the next chapter.
Yeah. No,
like there were 2 chapters. Normally it was just like 1 chapter of Job, 1 chapter of one of his friends, right?
Right.
But 21 and 22, I believe, are both Job. Like 22 is a continuation of 21.
But he switches his tactic up.
But that's in the next chapter. So in this chapter, it's the only chapter where he's only talking to his friends.
Got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And in the first part, verses 1 through 6 of chapter 21, Job pleads with his friends to change their attitude. Okay. He opens his speech with a plea for his friends to actually listen instead of mock him.
Yeah.
And he knows that his complaint is with God, not with any human beings. And therefore, he hopes that his friends will be his allies. But they instead add to Job's trauma by accusing him.
Fucking dicks.
Right. Which I think maybe is part of like Satan's doing. Like, I think that's part of the deal that he made with God. Like, another way he's fucking with Job.
Sure.
Is turning his friends against him.
Right. Literally leaving him out high and dry.
Yeah.
Completely.
Yeah. But I didn't really like get that as we were reading through that was one of the things that Satan was specifically.
Right. I don't think that was stated as one of the things that went bad. It just is one of the things that is bad.
Right. Exactly. So, I mean, and it's very clear that this is not normal because.
Moreover, his wife was the same way.
Yeah.
Only they just didn't touch on it that long. So.
Exactly. But everybody's turning. He's completely alone.
Right.
Everybody that he loves and cares about or respects or admires is either dead or completely turned against him.
Yeah.
And that's part of his suffering.
Right.
So in the next part of chapter 21, verses 7 through 16, Job questions why the wicked prosper and why they are not always punished as the friends insisted.
Right.
And so he confronts the friends to match their neat imaginary world with reality. And he's like, y'all, hey, what about XYZ?
Right.
Yeah. And then in the next part, verses 17 through 26, Job asks how often the wicked are punished. And he points out the lack of connection between a person's righteousness and the fullness of that person's life, implying that divine retribution is not actually reflected in this world.
Well, this is one of the things that bothered me because I remembered reading that when we read the last one, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
And Job was saying something in the last one about how they get their punishment by dying and then the end, right?
Yeah.
Like they're going to, but he's saying the exact opposite in this chapter.
Well, I think that we misunderstood it. I think that he wasn't saying that they do get punished. I think he was saying they might as well not get punished because everybody dies. Like that's what we were saying. And I think that we misunderstood it because he's making that same,
Oops,
you did not silence your alerts. Yeah. You were a bad. He did not, I lost my train of thought. Stupid alert. So he was basically saying in this part, as well as in the part that we discussed, everybody dies at the end. So that's like the punishment that we all get. That's not just the evil that get that. So it's kind of not fair.
Sure.
So yeah, I think we got that one wrong.
Okay. All right.
Which that's fair enough. Let's see. Okay. In the next section, verses 27 through 34, Job remarks the failure of the friends' rebuttals. And he closes the second round of debate with them by pointing out the insubstantiality of his friends' comfort. So he's like, y'all are wrong and you're not comforting me and this is bullshit.
Right. Yeah.
So
no, they're not good friends.
They're not. And again, that may be by design.
Right. And honestly, even if Job is kind of a shitty person, he has every right to be pissed at his friends. Because if you're his friends, you already knew he was kind of a shitty person.
No.
He's not, according to God and according to this book, he's not.
Right.
But,
even
they're
if he
supposed to be your friends.
Okay, now I have something to say about that. As I was doing this research, a lot of times it didn't refer to them as his friends. It referred to them as the friends, meaning they were friends with each other.
Oh.
Not necessarily Job's friends. They were just 3 friends.
Well, then they can really piss off.
Exactly. Now, I don't know how true that is, but it struck me the way that the research that I was doing was written, that it makes me wonder if maybe we got that wrong too, that they weren't Job's friends. They were just some friends that were like trying to talk Job into coming back around to God or whatever.
Well, and that's one of the things that is really hard about the Bible is that there are so many interpretations, even with the words that are there now, that with all the interpretations that have been mishandled over time and even to this day, it's almost impossible to know exactly what was supposed to be, quote unquote, in that book.
Exactly. Yep. So, in the next chapter 22, Eliphaz starts off the third and final round.
Okay. Yep.
So this round can be seen as incomplete because there is no speech from Zophar in this round.
Oh.
Okay. And the speech by Bildad is very short. As we recall, it's only 6 verses long.
Right.
Okay. And I'll get more into that when Bildad comes up. Okay.
Okay. Yep.
So in the first part of chapter 22, verses 1 through 11, he discusses Job's offenses.
Right.
Okay. So Eliphaz opens his speech with a gentle tone, but he soon attacks Job, followed by a string of accusations.
Well, but they weren't even specific accusations at things Job did.
Right.
He just is assuming,
He's
based
like,
on what I was hearing.
Obviously, you're evil. Obviously, you're a son of a bitch.
Right.
And obviously,
here's
you're
the
bad.
things you must have done.
Right. So Eliphaz asserts that God does not punish Job because he is righteous, but because he must be unrighteous.
Right.
So that just goes along with what you said. He's just like, obviously you're bad.
And I think I commented on this at the time. There is some of this thought process in Christians of today.
Mm-hmm.
They assume that if something bad is happening to you, you must deserve it.
Obviously.
It's just a weird way to think about people and their downfall. And like, wow, you just assume that this God is punishing people.
Right.
And there is no redeeming them because they are bad in God's eyes.
Well, I mean, on a larger grand scale, they say that all of these school shootings are because we've taken prayer out of school.
Right, right.
And that's
clearly the
wrong.
They completely do away with empathy and lay it all on God.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can't even have empathy for people because you just automatically assume that it's God's fault. No, it's not God's fault. That it's their fault for going against God.
Mm-hmm.
So people that are religious, in my opinion, have so much less empathy than people who aren't, because their default position is that they are assuming that person was bad and wrong.
Right. Like, that's your karma. You got what you deserve.
Right. And I just can't imagine living my life like that, thinking that everybody that was down on their luck is an evil and bad person.
Right.
Like, that's such shit.
It is. It really is. And I don't get it either.
Yeah.
But it's a very convenient way of thinking.
Sure. You don't have to, worry about anything.
Right.
Great. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm. So the next section, chapter 22, verses 12 through 20, he talks about God's knowledge and power. So Eliphaz describes God's majesty to counter what he perceived as Job's claim of God as having limited knowledge and an inability to see through deep darkness, rendering God unable to judge properly. So I don't know if you recall, but Job was like laying it on, and he was like saying, he's not doing this correctly. He clearly doesn't see that I'm an upstanding, like, blameless. Like, I don't.
Right.
I don't see how he could.
Yeah.
And Eliphaz is like, excuse you.
Right.
And so he's, going off on Job about that.
And I think I mentioned this too. Like, there's so many things that are hard to deal with in this book, because technically, these guys are sitting there listening to Job basically tell them that God is wrong.
Yeah.
Right?
And so from their perspective, based on what they've been taught, they're in the right to say, oh, no, Job.
Right.
You can't do that.
And even be offended by it, probably.
Yeah.
Like, I get, in the context of the story, I get that reaction.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still, like, I feel like this is where Christians in general, or religious people in general, should say, and I like the Christians sometimes that are like, it's not up to me to judge. I'm not, and if they truly believe it and live it, then they're usually accepting of most people, and they are empathetic, and they are, like, they still have the good traits of good people, right? But if you're not that person, you're the one of those horrible Christians.
Yeah.
that judges people and assumes that they are correct because God.
Exactly.
I fucking hate that mentality.
It's just so closed.
Yeah.
It's closed off, and it's convenient, and it's lazy.
Right.
In the next section of chapter 22, verses 21 through 30, he urges Job to repent. So Eliphaz outlines the ways for Job to return to God.
Yeah.
And his tidy analysis and advice are unfortunately based on a misdiagnosis of Job's situation, as we pointed out.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got it wrong. He's
he
like, you've done wrong. Here's what you need to do. And the reader knows you are an arrogant fool, Eliphaz. And Job knows it, but he doesn't know why.
Right.
And that's the frustrating part.
Sure.
Because we as readers want to tell Job, no, you're right. You're right. And here's why. Here's what God is allowing to happen to you.
Yeah. Again, I have questions. The whole thing just brings up so many fucking questions.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But,
and what I just said is from the perspective of if I'm reading this as a student, not as just somebody outside just reading it and going, what the fuck?
And we play quote unquote devil's advocate a lot in this podcast just to, play the game and try to figure out what the meaning is behind some of this stuff. So
because it's easy to just read it and go stupid. That would be just as lazy as a Christian going evil.
To be fair, we do that sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. I'm not saying that we don't. But I like to think that we add more to it by trying to understand where these people are coming from. Why do they think that? Why did they do that?
Right. I mean, I honestly want to. I want to question the Bible in a way that makes sense to not just me but to other people. I want people to get something from the questions that I'm asking, and even though I'm making fun of it, I feel like the questions that I'm asking are legitimate. Yeah.
I mean, even toward that end, we have empathy, to use that word again, for Job's friends or the friends, whatever.
Sure.
For them thinking what they think.
Because in that context, it's hard to believe what's going on.
Yeah.
As their friends, it's hard if they believe in God and if God were real, it's hard to believe that this is what is actually happening.
Sure. Toward that end, we can look at Fox News watching motherfuckers and have empathy. Even as we hate them and don't make excuses for them, we can have empathy and be like, I totally see how they turned out that way. They've been brainwashed. Why wouldn't they think what they're thinking?
No.
Why wouldn't they be scared? Why wouldn't they want to shoot people?
No, I think that's the important. You have to be able to look at things from outside of your little corner of the world. You have to be able to step outside of yourself and see why this is happening versus just that it is happening.
Sure. Sure.
So
you can hate something but still understand the context of it.
Right.
So one doesn't preclude the other.
Yeah.
So moving on to chapter 23. In response to Eliphaz, Job starts by speaking to God indirectly as third person.
Right.
Although it is spoken toward his friends before he addresses Eliphaz directly in chapter 24.
Okay.
And when he does that, he addresses Eliphaz on the issues raised in chapter 22.
Got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the first part of chapter 23, verses 1 through 7, he ponders litigation against God. Job revisits the possibility of legal action to get vindication. He's trying to be very methodical in his thinking. He's laying out his case and saying, if I could just lay this case out before God, I'm sure everything would come straight and even and everything would make sense.
Right.
He does not intend to achieve victory in the case, but his ultimate goal is just to prove how righteous God's judgment is. So, and I didn't get this when we were reading it. He's saying, I don't want to make sense to God. I want God to make it make sense to me.
Okay.
So if I could just present this, then God would see it and be like, oh, I see why you think that, and break it down and explain it back to me.
Being that Job is a righteous man, a godly man, that makes sense. It's not how I read it exactly.
No, I didn't read it that way either, but that's the research that I saw read it that way, and so I thought that was something to bring to the table.
No, that's fair. That's fair.
And Job is very confident because he believes in God and because he trusts and loves God. He is very confident that God will treat him justly as an impartial judge.
Right.
So, I mean, it hasn't even entered his head for a minute that he's being, according to this research, again, that's not the way I read it, but according to this research I did, he's not being treated unjustly. Job just doesn't understand
the
why.
reasons. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he's like,
when he finds out.
Oh, yeah.
If he finds out.
Yeah, I have no idea.
I'd be fucking pissed.
I would be pissed too. I would be like, and all your credibility is shot.
Right. Yeah.
No grace from me, my good sir.
Yeah. Yeah.
In the next section, verses 8 through 17, we go through his search for a terrifying God. He describes his search framed by the absence and then the presence of God. He believes God knows all of Job's ways and will complete the purpose of Job's life.
Okay.
And Job acknowledges, I had a really hard time with that, how terrified he would feel if he could finally achieve his wish of being in the presence of God. So he testifies that he is both longing and afraid of God.
Right.
Which makes sense. I mean, he's like, I totally want to see this motherfucker. But do I though? I mean, that's pretty fucking scary.
Well, I mean, you believe that he did this to your, like, this is, the things that are happening to you are because of God. Mm-hmm. And I think I definitely said this earlier, but like, if these things happen to me, I'm going to be scared of whoever did that to me.
Right.
You know, like that's a terrifying motherfucker.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, for now, you're still believing in his goodness.
Right. Right.
So, ooh.
And you haven't met him before, so
right.
You should be scared, probably.
I think so.
Based on some of the things I've seen him do, I would be fucking terrified if I thought he was real.
The arbitrary bullshit God has pulled.
Right. So
moving on to chapter 24. In the first part, verses 1 through 12, he reflects on oppression. Okay? Mm-hmm. So Job, this is where he addresses the issue of the oppression of the poor that Eliphaz had raised in chapter 22.
Okay.
Okay? He asks about the times when the wicked are allowed to oppress and prosper without punishment, and then he gives a bunch of ample evidence to prove his case.
Right.
And I did not list all those because we read them at the time and we're like, I know, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Job concurs with Eliphaz that oppression exists, but questions why God does not act in judgment against the oppressors while listing the kind of actions and attitudes that Job regards as morally reprehensible.
Right.
So he's like, I agree with you that these things are there, but why is my question.
Yeah.
And it's not right.
Right.
You know, the case that you're laying before me is X, Y, and Z. And I'm telling you that X, Y, and Z do not make your argument.
Right.
Like, I don't think that means what you think it means, kind of thing. So in the next section, verses 13 through 17, he talks about serious wrongdoing going on in the world.
Yeah.
Okay. It's the more serious wrongdoings like murder, adultery, and stealing in the same order of appearance as the 10 Commandments, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah.
And the key image here in this section is darkness and light, with a key implication that those who choose the paths of darkness are not caught or held to account.
Right.
Whereas God's light should expose them. Should being the key phrase.
Right, right.
Yeah. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah. No, it's a hang up I've got.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah.
So the next section is verses 18 through 20, the fate of the wicked. Job knows that the wicked would be swallowed by Sheol or death so suddenly and completely that they would be utterly forgotten, as if they never existed.
Yeah, I remember them going over that. We were discussing how essentially everyone gets forgotten.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You know,
but he's saying that only the evil and wicked do. And that the good will be remembered by their ancestors or by their descendants.
That's bullshit. Now, I mean, like, yes, okay, we still know about, hypothetically, if Job was a real person, we still know about Job, right? Mm-hmm. But that's even if he was or is or could have been a real person, mm-hmm. the fact that we know about him is not anything but a history's fluke.
Okay, I'm going to push back on that just a little bit. I don't think he's talking about being remembered by history or by the world.
Okay.
He's specifically, I think, talking about being remembered by his children, his children's children, his descendants to come, like a family thing. And they did remember their descendants. You know what I mean? That's true.
They wrote down the names and they names.
It was very important to them.
It was.
So that's what he's saying. Removed from the record.
But let's say you get 2 generations beyond after you die, right? Mm-hmm. They might remember your name. They might know a story or two if you had some story to tell, but they don't know you. No. They don't remember you.
But his point is that your name will be among those that we say out loud. Yeah, that's not important to me and you. Well, obviously, we don't give a shit. We'll be dead, right?
Right, yeah.
But it was important to them. So to have their name erased like that meant something.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Well, I feel like that's something that's important to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I've dealt with that in my I went through in my 20s, I went through a thing where I felt like I wanted to redefine myself and reevaluate myself, you know? Mm-hmm. And part of that was coming to grips with what death is and what your life is in general.
Who do you want to be as a person?
Who do I want to be as a person? And personally, I wanted to choose to be a good person that did things that I believe in. That's who I wanted to be, who I want to be. Mm-hmm. But I also decided that it has no bearing on my legacy. Like my legacy, I don't give a shit about my legacy. Mm-hmm. No one's going to remember me for opening a door for an old lady, right? No one's going to remember me for doing a small deed that is good for somebody else. But those are the things that I want to do. Those are the things that I feel good about myself for doing because I helped another person have their day be a little bit easier, right? Mm-hmm. Or, even like going to protests. I don't want to be the person running it, but I involved myself and did something to further a cause that I believe in. Mm-hmm. I'm not expecting stories to be told about it. I'm not expecting to be some famous person for it, but it is something I chose to do and wanted to do. I don't know where I was going with all that. But
I get what you're saying. You want to be a good person regardless of what your legacy is. And that makes total sense. But they were very concerned with their legacy because, they had the punishment upon them passed down to future generations. So the line went forward and backward.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's why it would have been a very big threat to them.
You don't want those great grandkids 7 generations from now cursing your name because you fucked up.
Right. I mean, that mattered.
Right.
So to have their name completely erased, that was a big punishment.
Right.
Yep. Like, it would be, here's a very small, silly equivalence, okay? Sure. My mom would ground me to my room if I misbehaved. I didn't give 2 shits if I got grounded to my room because I would just lay in my bed and read.
Right.
Now, eventually, which I'm a big reader. That's how I pass my time. That's what I do. I love books. I love the written word,
right,
etc. Okay. When my mom finally caught on that I didn't give a shit about being grounded to my room, she grounded me from my books.
Right.
That was huge to me.
Right.
To somebody else who's not a reader, to my sister, for example, my sister wanted to play with toys.
Yeah.
So grounding my sister from books, that would not be a good threat because who gives a shit?
Right, right.
So that's what I'm trying to say. Like, the fact that these people felt that having their name remembered was big, it doesn't matter to us, but that doesn't make it any less important to them.
Yeah, no, I get it.
Okay. So moving on, the next section of chapter 24, verses 18 through 20, the fate of the wicked.
Okay. Yep.
Job knows that the wicked would... Oh, we just read that. I'm sorry. They'd be swallowed and forgotten.
Yeah,
Got it. Okay. The next one is verses 21 through 24, the prospering of the wicked. However, before that happens, before their names get forgotten, God seems to preserve and prolong the lives of such wicked who wrongfully treat childless women and widows, and God even seems to give them security and protection.
Yeah.
And Job challenges his friends to prove him wrong about the examples he has given.
Right.
Which I didn't pick up on that. But he's like, sitting at his, lemonade table stand and has a sign out front that says, "Prove me wrong."
Right.
Like, I didn't pick up on that, but he does. And then the next section is verses 24 and 20. Let me try that one more time. The next section of chapter 24 is verse 25.
Okay.
A final challenge to the friends. Okay. Job dares his friends to disprove his argument that there is observable injustice in the world, but God will eventually balance the scales of justice. And significantly of note, none of the three friends takes up Job's challenge. None of them argues with him on that point.
Well, it's probably fairly obvious.
Yeah. So I didn't catch that the first time around, that he made the challenge. More so even did not catch that they didn't even pick up his challenge either.
Right.
So the next chapter 25, this one is Bildad, and this is the one that is only 6 verses. And this is where we reach the fun bit.
Okay.
Yeah. It only has 6 verses, but it is not the shortest chapter in the Bible.
Well, that's okay.
Okay?
Yeah, all right.
Consisting of only 2 verses, Palm. I'm so sorry. Psalm 117, shut up, is the shortest psalm and also the shortest chapter in the whole Bible.
Wow.
2 verses.
Wow.
Okay?
We'll have to figure, that's going to be a short...
we're going to have to come up with a different system for psalms, which I have said before. Yeah. Because a lot of them are only like a little paragraph.
Doing like 3 or 4 at a time or something like that.
I'm thinking probably 3 at a time. Right. Just to not have short, stupid episodes.
Yeah, right.
So I'm not sure what we're going to do with Psalms. And they're not stories.
Right. So we might have to we might even have to build in like our Q&As into those episodes too.
Yeah.
Just to
talk about each one, because they don't talk about a cohesive story. Each one is just like a prayer or like he is so great or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
So we're just gonna have to change it up.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So after that 2 verses, the next shortest one, which I don't even recall this, was Esther chapter 10.
Okay.
Had 3 verses.
Oh wow.
I don't remember that. Do you?
No.
Okay, the next one, also with 3 verses, are several psalms. I won't read out the numbers because who cares? And then with 4 verses or 5 verses are more psalms. And then there's a chapter in Jeremiah, another chapter in Hosea, which each have 5 verses.
Okay.
Okay. And then Job chapter 25 and several psalms have 6 verses.
Got it.
So we were so blown away by this as only having 6 verses.
Yeah.
It does not stand alone. It's not even impressive.
Got it.
We've already passed one before this that was shorter. The second to the shortest.
Right.
So I kind of feel like, oh, my bad. Nothing. It's kind of like if you hit a big pothole and then you're like...
Maybe it was more of a run-on sentence or something.
Yes. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, as I was saying, it's kind of like if you hit a huge pothole and it fucks up your tire and you're like, that hole is so deep. And then you go see the Grand Canyon and you're like, oh, that hole was nothing.
Yeah.
So, okay, here we are in chapter 25.
Okay. Yeah.
Clearly, Bildad has little to say. And he runs out of steam before he and the other 2 friends, Eliphaz and Zophar, trail off into silence.
Okay. Yep.
So they're done talking. The dialogue between Job and his 3 friends is practically over, with neither Job nor the friends getting closer in their positions to each other.
Right.
It's kind of like us talking to a Republican. Nobody's going to convince the other.
Right.
It's kind of pointless almost.
Yeah. Yeah.
Bildad's strong belief in the retribution theology, you got what you deserved.
Yeah.
And if you are being punished this bad, whatever you did must have been equally bad.
Right.
Okay. That makes him believe that humans are worthless and contemptible before the transcendent God who establishes order and peace in heaven. Remember, he was like, humans suck.
Right.
Before God.
Yeah.
Bildad misconstrues God as viewing humans with utter revulsion as just maggots and worms.
Yeah.
Remember?
I do.
And this speech adds little because it seems like a mechanical repetition of what Eliphaz already said in his first 2 speeches. that no one is righteous before God, and that Job has accepted that he is a sinner, only that Job still questions his sufferings compared to other sinners.
Right.
So it's like they kind of have reached an impasse.
Yeah.
And
there's only so much you can say about this.
Right. So. Like, you don't even agree on the basic tenets.
Right.
Like, if we were talking to a Republican at this point, like, we don't even agree on what climate change is.
Didn't we make some comment on either the last episode or the one before it, about how they're just stretching for word count at this point? This feels like they're just like going on about the same shit over and over.
And it's like it finally came to a head in Bill Dad, and he's like, I just got this to say.
Right.
People suck. That's all.
Right.
So that is the Q&A. That's what I brought to the table.
I thought you were going to tell me when the fun part was. Was it the...
I did, and I said, this is the fun part.
Oh, man. I must have not really listened to that.
You do blow me off quite a bit.
I apologize. Mm-hmm. So was that the short things?
Yeah.
The short things. Got it. I thought that might have been it, but
I did say.
I'm sure you did.
Bit.
I'm bad. I'm wrong. I fucked it up. Yeah, all that stuff.
Okay. You're ugly.
No, whatever.
Okay. You're like Job and wish you'd never been born?
No.
No?
No, I'm not.
Too far?
Too far.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, so that you were saying that was the Q&A.
That's the Q&A. I don't feel like we had a specific question, and I don't feel like I answered it other than our comment.
No, but I
that
feel
was
like
short.
I learned a lot there. So.
I did learn a lot. I'm glad I did a summary.
Yeah, no, that was good. I appreciated that.
Yeah, me too. So
all right. Hopefully you guys did too.
Oh yeah, I really hope that anybody else who was taking our interpretation stuck around for this Q&A, so that there were places where I do think we got it wrong.
Yeah, no, and that's why we do these now, because we feel like this is very helpful for us to understand what we just read.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I actually think our Q&As are one of my favorite things we do now.
I agree. So completely.
Yeah. All right. Well, that was it for today. Tomorrow is Sunday, and we'll be back with a
Patreon.
Right.
I need to come up with a jingle for that.
Right? Yeah.
I keep saying that.
That's like one of the only things we don't have a little jingle for.
I need a jingle.
Yeah.
Jingle,
I'll have to think about that.
I'm the king of ding-a-ling. Okay. What?
Anyway.
Right.
So, and then I'll be getting the weekly replay done also on Sunday. And then we'll be back on Monday with
Job chapter 26.
All right. We'll see you guys then.
Yep. Bye.
Hey, wife, I guess that's the end?
But husband, that's just sad.
It doesn't have to be. We are on lots of social media platforms like Twitter. Our handle there is sacrilegious_D.
For D's nuts.
Oh my God. Stop doing that. Anyway, we're also on Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest. There's a link to all of our social media sites at our website.
Ooh, we have a website?
Yeah, it's sacrilegiousdiscourse.com, where you can also find a link to our merch shop.
We have a merch shop?
Yep. We have podcast-themed clothing, mugs, notebooks, and more, as well as an atheist and science-themed products.
Wow, our fans should really go check that out right now.
Definitely. They can get in touch with us by sending an email to sacrilegiousdiscourse@gmail.com. But before they do that, we could really use some help.
Oh yeah? With what?
Well, it's not free running the podcast, and we need some financial support in order to get better equipment, which will free up time so we can concentrate on our podcast and our fans.
Okay, so what should they do?
Head over to patreon.com/sacrilegiousdiscourse and sign up as a contributor on our podcast. Supporters there receive additional bi-weekly episodes that we record just for our Patreon members for as little as $2 a month.
Also, we'd really appreciate it if you would like and subscribe on whatever platform you're using.
And Apple Podcast reviews help us out tremendously.
Like and subscribe. Leave an Apple review. Join us on Twitter. Support us on Patreon. That's a lot of instructions. Don't forget to say thanks.
Thanks.
Okay, bye.
I'm Stephanie Wong, and I'm your guide through the people and places that make up the internet. And I'm back as the host of the third season of Where the Internet Lives, a podcast from Google about the unseen world of data centers. This season, we're exploring how data centers change the world around them in surprising and transformative ways. We'll hear stories about prairie restoration, the solar energy boom, recycled canal water, and cities undergoing economic transformation. Subscribe to Where the Internet Lives on Google Podcasts, YouTube, Apple, Spotify, or anywhere you get your shows.
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. here's a show that we recommend.
The program is neither good nor bad. It's like a hammer. You can use it to build a house or break a skull.
Welcome to The Program, a sci-fi anthology set in a world in which money, state, and God became fused into a single entity called The Program.
Perhaps AI overtook us just like global warming did, with people bickering is it real or not right up until the water finally rose above their mouths.
Visit programaudioseries.com or find it wherever you get your podcasts.
Acast helps creators launch, grow, and monetize their podcasts everywhere. Acast.com.